everyone got a chance to get some coffee, maybe some breakfast. I think we're going to go ahead and get started here today. So those who don't know me, my name is Brandon Downey. I'm the president and CEO of Trilogy Innovations. Got a chance to meet a lot of you last night. Great event. I definitely appreciate everyone showing up and participating. So this year's conference, we're gonna focus on something a little bit different. We're gonna focus on opportunity. And I'm gonna get into why I say that here shortly. So we all know that opportunity cannot be possessed or controlled. It's one of those things that's always elusive. There's always some situation that actually influences that particular opportunity. But the moments that the opportunities present can be taken advantage of. Now, though fleeting, the full advantage of these opportunities can lead into additional opportunities, additional moments to be taken advantage of. So these opportunities are different for everyone here in this room, whether or not you're here for economic diversity for the state, whether you're trying to better understand the customer, or you're trying to understand the latest policy in cybersecurity. No matter what the reason, the opportunity generates the longevity and sustainability that we're actually truly looking for. Now, what I would like to do is I want anyone that's representing a small business to raise their hand. Okay, perfect. Now, today you have an opportunity to showcase your capabilities and create moments that will give you the power to transform and transcend the perceived stature, limitations, and stereotypes that you may have. You have the opportunity to create new partnerships and create these moments, these ideal moments for you to reach out, venture out in order to create your company, your firm into a competitive giant. Now, I want you to use this platform today. I want you to speak loudly. I want you to speak confidently. And I want you to talk about the innovations and capabilities that your firm is currently doing. There are a lot of firms here that are West Virginia based. We don't often get the microphone. We don't often get the spotlight. But you have the ability today to talk to government agencies, large vendors, medium-sized companies. You're able to take your resume directly to them and ideally create new partnerships that's going to create that competitive giant that I spoke of. Now, to all the government agencies, to all the mid-sized, large companies in the attendance today, I want you to take note of everyone that raised your hand. I want you guys to reach out to them. I want you guys to create new connections, new partnerships, and together we can actually bring more opportunity here to the state. Now, the next 8 hours is that moment. It's very brief, but you have the opportunity to do something special for yourselves and everyone else in attendance. Now, again, I'm going to keep this very brief. I did say that I would only last for a few minutes. For some reason or another, my team thinks I get long-winded at times. But the one thing I wanted to do is sincerely thank each and every one of you for your participation today. Now, what I'd love to do right now is bring up my brother, my partner in crime, my co-conspirator, Mr. Randy Cottle. Right.
Since this is a tech conference, I have a digital cheat sheet today instead of the paper-based copy. Brandon still likes to print stuff off, which is awesome. But obviously, we try to do more technical here. Again, we want to thank everybody for coming out today. We had probably 210 people last year. This year, we had close to 350 people register, which is amazing. So the word is definitely getting out. Real quick, we'll go to the intro slide. Next slide. Just wanted to let you guys know what we're going to be doing and talking about today. We did a different format, so this year we're actually having panels, which we're going to come up and it'll be more of a casual conversation. We'll go through a series of questions, and then afterwards we'll actually turn it over to you to ask questions of some of these folks. Next slide, please. So I don't know how many people know this, but we actually started a nonprofit organization last year. So just so you know, none of the money from this goes to Brandon and myself, although we would like it. Um, we actually got certified as a 501c3 last year in December, which is awesome. So the C3, what we think of when we say C3 is community, collaboration, and cooperation. So all the money that's being raised is actually going back to the community. And I'll talk about that here in a minute on the next slide. But what we're trying to do is collaborate with academia, large businesses, small businesses, government agencies, and try to bring everybody together because together we'll all succeed. And that's part of the last C, which is cooperation. We're sincere about saying, all you small businesses, we want to meet the large businesses, meeting vendors. Together, sorry about that, together, the tide rises all ships, right? And that's just our mentality. Can you go to the next slide, please? So these are the initiatives. So all the sponsorships that we got, so this year we raised $93,000, which is amazing. And that's thanks to all of you for being here, our sponsors, Platinum, Gold, everybody that contributed. It does cost a lot of money to run these type of things, but what we're doing with that money is some of these initiatives that you see. This year we're starting a new program and we called it TIPS, which stands for Training and Internship Program Services. So what this does is the Pinkerton Foundation, because all your donations, we're going to hire in interns and pay them out of the Pinkerton Foundation. But we're going to loan them out to large, small businesses, anybody that has a facility clearance, and as far as that free labor, you will sponsor them for either a secret or top secret clearance, which almost guarantees you having them in your internship and them having a clearance, they're going to get a job right out of college. And that's the way we're going to try to keep our people here and grow this community and create basically a pipeline for all of you. We're also working with Scott Road Truck and Donna Paduta. We're trying to do the K through 12, the STEM and STEAM programs, donating money back to them because you really have to start from the kindergarten level up through 12th grade. I didn't really get into computers until like my senior year of high school, and then I went to work for, I know I say high school, but I'm from Randolph County. But I say a little funny. But after I graduated, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I started programming a CNC machine. I thought, well, this is really exciting. So then I went to WVU full-time to become a programmer, met Brandon, found out I'm not a programmer, okay? So I'm terrible. He was trying to teach me what a double array was, and he's like, come on, you got this. And I'm like, no, I don't. So I switched to the business school when I was at WVU, and then went back to get a master's in software engineering, so I knew what he was talking about. But as part of that, you know, we work with a lot of different vendors, and we've seen what's coming out and where everything is moving. A lot it's moving to the cloud. So we're doing these training classes and a certification program to make sure that these students or people that's looking to switch to different careers are getting certified. That's pretty much some of the initiatives that we're working. We just wanted you to know where your money is going. Next, is Karen here? Karen? Oh, there she is. Hi, Karen. So we are really honored to have Karen Evans as our keynote speaker this year. After last year's event, thanks to Frank Vitale, we got a hold of Karen. Karen is actually the former federal chief information officer under the Bush administration, and now she's the current managing director of the Cyber Readiness Institute. So she might know a little bit about cybersecurity. So we want to welcome her up to the stage at this time.
No, I just gave them to him some updated slides. Okay. All right, there's my bio. I've never seen my bio up on a big screen like that. Um, so, good morning, everybody. I'm really excited. I had the opportunity to meet Brandon and Randy last year, and I'm all about West Virginia. So I'm really excited to be here. And when they asked, hey, would you keynote the next Tech Yeah? And I said, yeah, of course. So, Tech Yeah, let's go. But I'm also excited to be here in West Virginia University. So if they could load up my slides. I'm a two-time graduate from the university. I am an undergraduate in chemistry, and I got my master's in business. And the new building down here, if you guys get a chance, so I'm all excited about the internships and everything that they're going to do. There is a cybersecurity lab in the Business and Economics School. I see somebody shaking their head. It just happens to be called the Dr. Randy and Karen Evans Cybersecurity Lab, which is, so if you get a chance to go down there, you should go down and really see that building. It is a flagship building for the university, and anytime that I get a chance to come back to Morgantown and come back and give to the state, I never moved to Washington, D.C. I spent 30 years there, off and on. My last go-around, I was the Assistant Secretary for Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response, the first, and right now the only confirmed Assistant Secretary for that position. And then my last job I did was the DHS Chief Information Officer, where I had the wonderful opportunity to handle DHS's incident response as it related to SolarWinds. So fortunately or unfortunately, I do have a little bit of background in cybersecurity. I also, just a little fun fact about me, got to handle the very first incident response that the government had in 1996, which was so think about that. Yeah, I'm really old, guys. But it was at Department of Justice, where all the agencies had to put up new websites. We had this executive order, everybody was to get on the web. And at the Department of Justice, the website was hacked, and it had the naked body of Jennifer Aniston with the face of Janet Reno imposed on top of it. And I learned a lot about how many people came to the website and about caching and how efficient the internet actually is. So with that little fun fact, I really want to focus on small and mid-sized businesses. So I'm going to open up, if we could go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to give you some statistics as we get started. That's one of them up there. But I was researching a few of these. And so here are some things that I want you to think about. So the average payout for a ransomware attack is $1.85 million, and it's only going up. That was the statistic from 2022. So if you're a small business in this room, how many of you can afford a ransomware attack and pay out $1.85 million? Like, I'm thinking that that's probably not just sitting in reserves. The other part of the statistic associated with this is 80% of the victims pay. And there's another website that has the top 5 payouts. So the last time this was updated was in 2023 of January. 3 out of the top 5 paid over $4 million to get their data back. And the recent Verizon report that just came out said 86% of the breaches were for financial gain. That's up from 71% last year. And when you start looking at this, 74% of the breaches are from human error or social engineering. So that's the backdrop that I want to start talking about, because in small, as we look at this, you're increasing more and more. Everybody gets on the internet. Everyone is using technology. There isn't a business that isn't using technology one way or the other, and it really is increasing the threat landscape, especially for small and mid-sized businesses. And small and mid-sized businesses, no matter what country you're in, are the economic driver for the economy in all those countries. I was just recently at a dinner where we were specifically talking about they're going to release a new cybersecurity strategy. They're going through, oh, we're going to do, these countermeasures, and we're going to have international norms, and we're going to do all those great things. And then there's like one sentence about, yeah, we really need to do something about, we're going to include something in the economy, and it's about small and mid-sized businesses. And then the whole conversation then moves again into technology, what are the international norms, how we're going to do this as a country going forward. And so I got on my soapbox, because you can do all these wonderful things, but if we don't take care of what's happening with small and mid-sized businesses because they are targets of opportunity, then it's going to continue on. Ransomware is, it's a business, right? It's ransomware as a service, and it's contracted out, and they do this stuff, and all of this ends up becoming you're part of an overall ecosystem. And so this is why I did join the Cyber Readiness Institute. So if we can go to the next slide, what I specifically want to talk about today, and we were talking about, as Brandon opened up, this is opportunities. I want to open up your eyes to an opportunity as you continue to work with all the large businesses, government agencies. Everyone is looking at this, and this is the idea of a cyber score. So what's happening right now as things are evolving is companies are now being scored on cybersecurity. And we recently relaunched what we call our Small Business Advisory Council. And we have 21 businesses that we vetted internationally. And we talk specifically about this score, and none of those businesses realized that they were being scored. And what is happening is when you start looking at this, this is feeding into some of the things as you look at the market associated with cyber insurance, whether they're going to cover you or not for cyber insurance, how this is going to affect things as you go forward, and how all of this works. So I want to spend some time talking about it, because initially it was associated with large businesses, and it was easy, right? Like, they had internal controls, they have an IT shop, they have cybersecurity professionals. So when you start moving down the chain and you start looking into some of these small businesses, a lot of small and medium businesses are using managed service providers for their accounts. They use outsourced payroll for paying their employees. They are doing the most. I go into my small town, and I'm from Martinsburg, West Virginia, and my florist apparently every other month has some kind of issue associated because they use Square. And so I'm getting like invoices and things like that where I, ordered flowers for somebody in Hedgesville, West Virginia, and I have to call them back up and say, hey, I haven't ordered any flowers. And so they all are using what is the easiest way for them to get up and running, right? And they're all using technology. So if you're in a supply chain, and when I say if you're in, all of you are in a supply chain. Somehow, one way or the other, you are. So depending on whether you're up or down that supply chain, you're now being scored. And so you could really benefit from having a good score, or it could really be detrimental to you for having a bad score. And when you look at this slide, these are some of the areas of where you're being scored. And this information, a lot of this information is publicly available about you. So it's not like you're putting this information out there. These larger companies are out there scanning this information, and they're picking up this information about your practices from your website, how you're doing certain things, and how it's working, and then they assess a score to you. So think of it as like a credit score, like Experian, but this is now a cyber score. So you can take some proactive steps. You can do some things as you go forward. I know like a lot of you have business insurance. I'm a small business myself. I have business insurance. How many of you have gotten a letter that says, hey, if you have a cyber incident and it's attributed to a nation state, we're not covering you? Has anybody gotten that yet? Anybody who's covered by the Hartford, you got it. Okay, it's like a 5-page letter. But the essence of the letter says, if it's attributed to a nation state, you're not covered. And what's happening now is most people aren't buying something specific for cyber insurance. They were. There's a whole industry that's evolving around cyber insurance, but they're thinking their business insurance is going to cover it for them, and it's not. So that's the other piece, and as you're going forward and you're looking at this, you're thinking in particular like, okay, well, I have business insurance, so I'm not going to buy this extra thing called cyber insurance because my business insurance should cover it for me, and I have to choose between what my expenses are because I'm very focused on what my resources are. I'm limited resource, and I'm about generating revenue. And that's what you're focused on. So if you have to decide between different insurances, what we're finding now is a lot of businesses are opting out of quote unquote cyber insurance because that's the first expense that they're letting go because they think, okay, it's covered by my business insurance. So I'm just, you need to think about this. And then again, I'm going to get back into you're a partner somewhere. So we were talking about, in the opening comments, Brandon said, take this opportunity. You're going to have different government agencies here. If you're working in the defense sector, you have the whole idea of the CMMC, whether those final rules ever get published or not, you're going to have to be able to talk about how are you protecting that information that you get from the prime contractor? How is that going to work? What do you have? And then the prime contractor has to look at you and say, hey, do you have certain things in place? Like, do you have these business practices? If you haven't had a chance to look at it, you should look at the model. They went from 5 levels to 3 levels. Level 1 is 17 practices. It's only 3 of them are technical controls. The rest are business practices that you should be doing within your small business every day. They are, related to policy and how you manage risk and how you're managing information within your organization. And then you have to turn around and sign a letter and self-attest that you have that done. And I'm going to tell you at the same dinner, I didn't get into the big argument with this person from this large company, but I talked to him afterward. He said, he argued with me about saying that, I take that self-attesting really seriously. And when I self-attest, I know it's right. He self-attests based on, he has a full-blown IT shop. He has a full-blown set of auditors. He has independent auditors that come back in and look at, so he's got 3 sets of people. So when he self-attests, he's looking at a lot of artifacts for that self-attesting. When you're a small or mid-sized business, you're not having all of those layers of independent review. So when you self-attest, that's you self-attesting to your business practices. And you can bring the auditors in, you can do this, but again, I'm back to, are you going to sign off because you have good business practices, or how is this going to work when you start self-attesting if you're in that DoD supply chain? And you really need to think about that because this could get really costly for a small business if they want to play in that market. Okay, so if we go to the next slides, which is my slide 4. Okay, so now I've kind of painted this really bleak picture for you going forward about all the different things that are happening, all the statistics that are out there, what kind of incentives are there. So nonprofits such as myself, we're focused on how do we help organizations so that you don't have to make these tough decisions about your resources, but that you can be a good partner in the ecosystem? So we are the Cyber Readiness Institute, and we do have a free program. And notice I said free, and I know you're going to come back and say, okay, nothing is free. You're right. You're going to have to commit your time to be able to complete it. And I know your time is also a big resource. But what our program really focuses on is the cyber readiness piece and the resilience piece of your small business. And our member companies that are part of CRI that are really focused and committed to the small business are Microsoft, Apple, MasterCard, Principal Financial, among those, because it's important to them that the ecosystem be raised up. And so you're thinking like, okay, well, why did these guys do that? The Cyber Readiness Institute was formed after President Obama had the Cyber Commission. So it had private industry in there, it had government. They made a lot of recommendations for the incoming Trump administration going forward. These are the things that needs to be done. The Obama administration started some of them, but everything was focused on critical infrastructure and public, right? So state and local governments and tribal governments. So they knew the big driver, again, for the economy is small and mid-sized businesses, which is what you guys started out with this morning. So they focused on the human behavior, so that's not going to be a surprise to you. Think back to the original statistic that I gave you, is 74% of these incidences come as a result of human behavior. And so this program, and we call it the Cyber Readiness Program, is really focused on the business practices and to help you grow. Because the whole idea is for you to grow to become a large enterprise, right? You want to grow, you want to do jobs, you want to get these contracts, you want to be good partners. And so the whole idea is to continue to grow. And what the program does, and we're not the only ones out here doing this, so you can find these resources out there, will give you like comprehensive cybersecurity policies. We give you templates that you can put into your organization to help you develop what these policies would be. You know, how to secure your data. We're focused on 4 core areas. This is not going to surprise any of you that, you know, work on these issues. It's focused on passwords. We call it Password Plus, because especially when you start going into some underserved communities, you're going to find out that it's really hard for them to have a second factor. And so you need to have strong passwords. So we say Password Plus, and then focused on phishing, removable media, and the other key part is automatic updates, because you don't have the ability to continuously test and put off different updates as they come out. So we really encourage people to do it. The other part of way that this program is focused is on employee training and awareness. So it's really about trying to change the culture of an organization. So everything that we're going to be talking about, I think everything where you were talking about its opportunities today, it's really going to be focused on the human behavior aspect and then the culture and how do you manage risk. So we do have training that's out there. It's within the program, but what we heard, because we're in our 3rd iteration of the program, was we broke out our videos so that you can actually use these videos to train your employees. So yet again, what we're trying to do is not make you have to choose between, do I invest money in this or do I invest money in cybersecurity? What we're trying to do is help you get this good foundation of cyber readiness and resilience. Again, the other thing that they're looking at in the cyber scores are related to vulnerability assessments. Now, you can hire probably several companies within this room to do the assessments for you, but once they do the assessments, you still have to go back and fix them. Okay, so we do give you some tools that allow you to then just kind of go through what are the things that are most important to you and what kind of weaknesses do you have associated with those, so that you really have an inventory. And the reason why this came about is two things. One of our member companies said, hey, after Colonial Pipeline and then everybody living through COVID, we really need to be focused on business continuity, right? Business resilience, business continuity, not just from a cyber aspect, but everything, since it's interconnected, like really getting the businesses to focus on how do you have that business continuity plan that is put in place. As part of that, okay, when you look at it, it's, your data backups. And the other thing that's built into the cyber score is your incident response plan. Okay, so you have to have an incident response plan. They look at you to see if you have that, which means you have the policies in place, then you know how to respond when an incident happens, and then you can recover from when an incident happens. So I'm going to remind you that the average ransomware payout is $1.85 million. So you can either invest the time to work on these types of activities, and you have like no excuse because there's free resources available, or you can carry $1.85 million in your pocket to be able to do this. And you can be the 20% who doesn't, or the 80% who does. Now, as these continue to grow, and as these threats continue to grow, the whole idea of a program like ours is to keep it sustainable. So if you're going to use a program that's free, then it's incumbent on us to make sure that our material is updated, that it's relevant to you, and that we have materials available for you as you continue to grow as a company. So these cyber scores, and the reason why I brought them up is I know for a fact, because we were putting a program in place at DHS, that we were specifically looking at capabilities of companies that were in our supply chain, and how our relationship is with them, and then how reliable of a business partner they were going to be in. Now, obviously, in the government, we're looking at multiple factors associated with their scores. It's multidimensional, but the cyber score one is really important. So I'll give you another little story. And this use case is out on our website, that we ran a pilot with Cyber Hawaii, which was focused on the defense industrial base because of the impending, which is still impending, CMMC rules. And so as that was going forward, they did this program, and what they ended up doing was taking the artifacts to their insurance company and showed them all the things that the program required them to do. And because they did that, they actually got cyber insurance, and they also got it at a reduced rate. So I'm highlighting all of these things to you because the whole idea of this conference is opportunities and for you to get a competitive advantage. Not that, I want West Virginia to be the best as we go forward. And so to get that competitive advantage, you have to be a good partner in the supply chain, and you have to have the resilience to be a reliable partner in that supply chain. So I wasn't going to put all this stuff out there without giving you a potential solution. So if we go to the last slide, this is our information, which is bcyberready.com. All this information is out there for you to use. We try to keep everything updated. And again, you have a wonderful agenda planned. I hope you guys come and sign up for this. I am working through the ecosystem for this to be a foundational certification going forward, so that if you get certified in the Cyber Ready program and you have multiple business partners, I want those business partners to accept that you have the foundation in place. So when you self-attest, and you've gone through the program and you're certified, so that's a whole nother discussion for another day, they will know that you have a business continuity plan in place, that you are addressing these 4 core issues, that you do have an incident response plan in place, and that you are cyber resilient and you are cyber ready. So Randy and Brandon, I wish you a wonderful day, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karen. And in the wake of a cybersecurity discussion, I want to take a moment to share the Wi-Fi password. It's very secure. It's capital P, A, $, WORD. So don't forget it. I know it's tough, super secure, but that's for all of us to share today, and we can pass that around. I'd like to give another round of applause for Karen. That was such an important keynote in the world that we live in. At this time, I want to take a moment to invite one of our sponsors up, Jason Herring, Senior Vice President at Leidos. Jason, can you come up and introduce our next panel? I also want to invite Wes, Brian, Jody, and Scott. We'll meet down here on this side, and we'll go ahead and get mic'd up for the panel that's coming up. Thank you. Jason, come on up.
Good morning. Less is more, right? You guys better be quick as you get mic'd up. Good morning. Before I begin, I really do want to give a special thanks to Randy Cottle and Brandon Downey for bringing us all together today. Really love what you guys are doing with Tech Yeah in the community here in West Virginia. We at Leidos, as a technology company, are very proud to support Tech Yeah and the broader small business and technology communities from right here in West Virginia. The partnership between government and industry has never been more important, and technology is at the center of that partnership. As we turn our attention to the next panel, we are very fortunate to have a distinguished group of government executives to talk to us about government and technology in the aftermath of COVID. So with that, let me make a few introductions. Do you guys want to take seats or do it from there? Awesome. So our moderator will be Scott Dix. Scott's is the director at Trilogy Innovations. There we go. And our panelists include Wesley Diedrich. Wesley is the director of NASA's Independent Verification and Validation Facility. You get to take your pick, Wesley. Good choice. All right.
One, two.
All right, we're good. Our next panelist is Brian Griffith. Brian is the Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI's Criminal Justice Information Services Division. Welcome, Brian. It's like they've done this before.
One, two.
All right. Our third panelist is Jody Ogle. Jody is the Cybersecurity Advisor for CISA. Morning, Jody. All this focus as they put on their mics. So, I am at I have a tie on. A lot of us have ties on. We're at a tech conference. I almost feel like I'm losing credibility. Morning, Jody. And our final panelist is Scott Augenbaugh, Director of the Air Force. Oh, with a fan base. I like it. Scott is the Director of the Air Force Tech Transfer and Transition Program Office.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome, Scott.
That's service with a small one, two. One, two. That's pretty
All right.
base.
With that, I'll turn it over to Scott Dix, who will be our moderator.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone, for your patience as we get everybody mic'd up here. We've been having such a positive experience with the venue here at the Marriott. They've done such a wonderful job. I hope that you're all enjoying the show so far. So, well, without further ado, I think we'll jump right in. If we can check this mic's getting a little bit of feedback in the room, maybe draw it down just a little bit, please. Awesome. So we'll kind of jump in here. We're going to go round robin, keep it relatively informal, and just kind of see where we go with this. But what we want to talk about is some of the challenges we faced in terms of agency transformation, especially in the wake of COVID-19 and the pandemic, and how agencies have had to make some pretty radical changes about how they achieve their mission. So without further ado, I'll jump in with some questions, and we'll decide. You can put your hand up if you're feeling particularly passionate about a question, and we can get you in there first. Otherwise, I'll pick my favorite as we go. So first, we're going to start off with the question about discussing the biggest challenges your agency has faced in its application of modernization efforts and how you've addressed some of these challenges. So let's talk about modernization first. Anybody want to put a finger up on that one?
Sure.
Awesome. So Wes Dietrich from NASA IVNV.
So honestly, I think one of the biggest challenges for us has been culture change more so than the technology, and getting folks to embrace new modern technologies. I mean, so if we think of like digital transformation, I mean it's a very broad and sometimes overloaded term, but if we look at it more generally in terms of the perspective of wanting to move forward and embracing new technology. We've been operating in a digital world for decades now, so it's not about moving from analog to digital. It's about how do we continue to embrace innovation and look for ways to adapt to a changing environment, which we certainly did a lot of during COVID. But we've seen a lot of new technology come and go, and for us, we're more of a systems engineering organization that relies on technology as an enabling capability for us versus someone that's focused on deployment of technology. So we're continually looking for ways to become more efficient and effective of what we do, which is supporting NASA's missions and helping ensure that a mission that one of the flagship missions. So we typically support like your $1 billion+ missions or any human-rated mission, so that they don't have a cyber event that potentially dangerous for the success of the mission, or they don't have a software failure that manifests in ops that ultimately results in the mission not being able to achieve mission success criteria. And what we do is we look at the software products and the products that give us insight into the cyber resiliency of the flight and ground systems, and make sure that we're confident that they're going to do what they need to do in very simple terms. So we're regularly looking at what tools, technologies, and capabilities out there, ranging from just workstation-based tools to compute in the cloud type capabilities that allow us to evaluate the software for those missions to get to a point that we're confident in. And honestly, folks get comfortable with what they use, and getting them to embrace something different. It's the devil you know is better than the devil you don't is a challenge, and then also getting confidence that it's going to deliver the results to us that we need to. It's finding the early adopters in the organization that something and help us basically get critical mass where we're showing the viability of it in a practical application. That seems to be one of the key points for us, and then it helps serve as that catalyst for adoption.
Absolutely. And, you're speaking to culture in there as well. Would anyone else like to add to that, specifically through the lens of culture?
So I think from a FBI CGIS perspective, one of the things that I think we did early on that was very much a cultural shift, but it has assisted us in technology modernization, is the embracing of Agile. Anybody that's worked with the FBI through the years know that for a long time we were a waterfall, long lead time, kind of an organization. And right around 2017, 2018, we started making this shift to Agile technologies. agile processes. We literally reorganized teams in such a way to create teams that could self-satisfy all parts of the mission. It could not have happened at a better time as we approached COVID, as we approached the pandemic shutdown, because you had these self-sustaining teams that were capable of continuing their mission without necessarily having to be a part of the big organization every day. So to your point about culture, yeah, I think that was a huge part of how we've changed as an organization. Then from a technology modernization perspective, you have to accept that technology is always going to be changing. That the next challenge is just right around the corner, and I think that those agile processes, we use the Scaled Agile framework. Those agile processes position you to be able to accept that change quickly.
That's great. That kind of takes us in. We're starting to blend into the second topic here, which is about how your agency has approached digital transformation and the strategies that were used. So, Jody, Scott, do you want to kind of add on and continue forward with that?
Sure. So it's very difficult to follow Karen because I'm a cybersecurity advisor for CISA, and everything that she said, I could just simply say ditto. But when you talk about the implementation of technology, we're kind of the antithesis of productivity, looking at it from a cybersecurity perspective. And I say that because technology is an enabler, and security sometimes is a disabler, right? But when the advice that I would give when anyone is implementing or procuring a new technology is to factor in the security considerations first. Is the product secure by design? Is it secure by default? And look at those things and make that decision that is appropriate based on some of those considerations. And on the subject of culture, we've been digital for a very long time. When I was, Randy, I'm a failed programmer as well, but when I was learning how to program 20-some years ago, security was an afterthought, and now it needs to be at the front of the thought process when you implement new technology.
I don't know where to start on this one. I was going to make some jokes, but I'll start with the story. And I think so. Air Force Research Lab is where I sit these days. And so one of the things that happened in COVID is all of us that had laptops that were issued to us, we had to dust them off, the ones that were in the closet, right? And then you had to first figure out, can I VPN in to the network that I need to connect to? And the answer in March was no. Because everybody was at home. I think it was the third week of March when we all got the, hey, stay at home, don't come into the office. And all of us sort of turned on our laptops those moments, and we saw that we couldn't do most of the things that we want to do. So another funny aside, the computer that I have had an overheating issue. It's a Surface Pro. And so rather than fixing and replacing the hardware, they just limited it so the battery would charge no more than 50%. And
I didn't even know you could do that. That's amazing.
Again, I think it's one of those things where you look at it and go, that doesn't seem like the way I would solve this problem. But when you're in a pinch, you're like, well, I guess we'll software limit this device. But I think that's one of the challenges that we have in the Defense Department, right? It's you're looking at systems that have been around for a long time. We have common access cards, so we have everybody in our group has it. We actually have sometimes multiple badges that we have to wear for security purposes. But we've built a lot of our system off the idea that you take your CAC, you insert it into a computer, you type in some combination of letters and or numbers. Sometimes you have a fob that you walk around with that helps you get access to some other system that you need to get to. It's all built off of those systems. So everything that we do has to fit within those constructs. The problem is when you're looking at technologies that are emerging and coming in very rapidly, probably technologies in this audience, you look at it and you want to implement it, and you're like, but they're not IL2, they're not IL4, right? They're not in this FedRAMP list that I'm supposed to be looking at right now for places to procure. So for the cybersecurity practices, I think this speaks to culture, is you have this great talent that's coming into the department, and they're looking at all these capabilities they can access commercially. You're like, man, I can't use that. Sorry. And so I think during COVID, I think that's one of the big cultural lessons I think we learned in the department is there's so many awesome tools that we could deploy, but they're just not ready for us right now. There's some steps that they have to go in, there's some compliance, and But it's a really exciting time. I think that there's a lot of things that we're trying out, but I don't know which part of the question, whether it's one or two, but it speaks, I think, mainly to there are some issues that we're working on the culture side, but I think there's so much opportunity to bring in commercial sector technologies and deploy them. There's just some compliance in between to get us to be able to use them.
Sure, and I know that that's a common problem in the realm of cloud. We've got our commercial clouds out there with just tons and tons of services that are available, and many of them are unavailable to us, right? They've got to be in the GovCloud space and things of that nature. So that kind of leads us to, the role that cloud plays in each of your agencies, and more importantly, how do we ensure security and privacy in the cloud as we move forward? What are the strategies? What are the thoughts? What are the approaches that you've taken to be able to leverage cloud, hopefully in the best way possible, but also keep us safe?
I'll take first stab at that, I suppose. We started our cloud journey in 2017, 2018. We did it in coordination with our Agile migration. We did that intentionally because we knew that in order to take advantage of what the cloud offered, that to take the flexibility and scalability, the agility that comes with the cloud and throw that into a legacy waterfall mindset wasn't going to be successful. We also took that as an opportunity to say we have plan of action milestone reports, POAMs as long as my arm, security vulnerabilities that we had basically kicked down the road for years and years and years. And we said, with this migration, with this role of cloud, we're going to use this as a chance to improve our security. And at the time I would say that, I think I came to a few conferences and I said, we expect cloud is going to make us more secure. The number of people who were like, I don't understand that. And it has. If you implement the tools in the cloud the way they are recommended, you obviously can't roll into a GovCloud, a FedRAMP GovCloud environment and assume that all of your security is managed. But if you implement the best practices, if you do things through automation, if you build in a truly SecDevOps way, such that security is the first thing you're considering, from the time you are testing that initial application, you've already begun to receive security vulnerability reports to be able to fix those things early. So we rolled it all together. We became agile, we moved to the cloud, and we got rid of that list of POAMs kind of as one big initiative.
No, that's great. And it's wonderful to hear that from the perspective of the FBI, that you are more secure, and that the faith and the trust is there. And I see Wes shaking your head, you're nodding fervently. Are you experiencing the same?
Yeah, so I would say I could probably speak more to our program than the agency as a whole. But I think one of the strengths that Brian hit on is certainly the automation aspect and taking the human error out of a lot of the more mundane and routine tasks that need to take place in a secure DevOps type environment. And then just also from a just good security practices, it's nice to be able to see those essentially being offered as services that you could just procure from the cloud. Now, one of the things that we're looking at from a continual migration perspective is, in the big scheme of things, our internal data center is very small. NASA as a whole, has a history of very huge data centers when you look at all the data that comes down from, our missions, especially when you look at client data, climate data, and then, being a public agency, we tend to try and make that data available to people, which has pros and cons. So, from a science research perspective, it's very beneficial to make significant amounts of data available. But there's also security implications of being able to make that available, especially when you have the interconnectivity between the systems. I mean, the data has to get from the command data centers over to the science processing centers somehow. It doesn't just go from a thumb drive to one, right? There's an interconnectivity there, and then making sure that that is more secure and people aren't able to basically enter in and then ultimately get through the system to the point of being able to control a spacecraft. So the cloud offers some of that data segmentation for us and the ability to move data from one environment to another environment and have confidence that it's secure. And Currently from an agency perspective, we do have internal cloud implementations, but we also do use Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and others. And I think, the agency is trying to get a handle on consolidating some of those services so we're not so disconnected. But it does seem like there is a lot of movement towards adoption of cloud in the agency and being able to take advantage of the services it provides, and one of those being more confidence in the security.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. And I'd love to hear from Air Force for a moment from Scott, and then kind of wrap up with CISA's take on the cloud and the advice that you would give to customers as well. Scott, would you mind commenting?
Sure. So I'm in a cloud development project right now. So Air Force Tech Transfer Office, we're building a tech transfer system database. And we're at that moment now where we've spent the last few years really building on one system, building on, I think, Cloud One system backbone. But we also have the opportunity to build it on Platform One. So I think one of the great things in these last few years is to see the emergence of some of these environments, especially on the DevOps side, and all the tools that are available to you once you join those communities, right? So the idea that you can bring in some of these open source tools. I used Mattermost and Suite CRM. I'm trying to think of Odoo. There's a bunch of other tools that you can look at when most of the time you walk into these environments and people are expecting it's going to be Salesforce. It's going to be something that they're familiar with, that's got commercial traction, been around for a long time. And so I think that it provides a lot of new opportunities for us to look at other systems that we can deploy, in some cases open source systems, that are as powerful in many ways as I was previously using Slack in deployment. So I think that's actually the big opportunity for the service, is to look at some of those other unique systems. We're still going to be using Jira and other systems that I think all of you probably looked at, you probably as well. But I think that's where I think the story is changed for the Air Force. There's a new digital transformation group inside of AFRL that's looking at some of these issues. And I'm sure there's another question in there somewhere that we can get to, but I would say that component of the conversation of cloud, talking to people, it's less the software and it's more the conversation about what we're trying to do, because there's so many new options that we can bring in.
Jody?
Yeah, thank you. So when from a cybersecurity perspective, and specifically if you look at post-incident perspective, something to consider when you're storing anything in a cloud or using the cloud for anything is that you're depending on someone else. It is what we at CISA call an external dependency. And it's really important to understand what you're getting and what you're paying for and what you're depending on. You can transfer some of the responsibility, but you're not necessarily transferring the risk. And it's just really important to factor that in. There are big brands. We try to stay away from saying brands at all, but there are big brands and then there are small brands. And I ran into a situation once for a small business where they were putting their data, offsite data storage, in the cloud, right? But that cloud provider was charging them extra for firewall service that they weren't paying. So they had no understanding of what that external dependence was, but it also goes back to my previous statement of considering security first. So when your bad day happens, not if, but when your bad day happens and there is some sort of cyber incident in your plan, you need to know what those external dependencies are, and specifically contractually what you have agreed upon and what they have agreed upon when you consider things like the cloud.
And well said. Any other wrap-ups on that or go-backs? Yeah, well said, gentlemen. So that kind of takes us to the next place, right? We've talked about cloud a little bit. How are we balancing that? How are you all balancing that as we move forward with the on-prem capabilities that you have, whether that's migrating or working hand in hand with your on-prem and cloud technologies? I wonder if you might each kind of go around and talk about the approach to sort of this hybrid model and maybe the direction that your agencies are going. Is it more cloud? Is it pulling back on-prem? How are you looking at things? So actually, we'll start with Scott this time. We'll go back around the other way.
Gosh darn it. The joke I always make in my family is that we always graduate in the top 10 of our classes because my last name's Augenbaugh, right? So usually pretty high up there on the stage. But that's usually the part that I struggle with these events, is usually get asked to go first, and I'm not necessarily the best person for this question. So I think when I start looking at this issue, and I think when the department looks at this issue, there's always a balance because of the nature of the information being stored. And so oftentimes we get mired in these debates over controlled unclassified information and PII and PH, protected health information. And that usually devolves into, well, guess we got to store this locally, right? Like, don't want this to get out. And I think that that's where, again, back to that system conversation with the cloud of making sure that we understand the cyber challenges with it and what will happen if this information, our social security information or something else gets out. One of the big reasons for that, though, and I know this is going to sound sad to all of you, is that we love to collect forms in the military. And there's so many forms. There are forms, there are numbers. You'll sit there and go, wow, I'm glad that you filled out your 2249 correctly. And so it's less the system these days and more where are you going to store the form and how is that information from the form going to go feed into another system. But we're not quite ready yet from a data perspective to talk about a system that works really well in the cloud because everything is very stovepiped and it's really trying to figure out how do you connect those very disparate systems together. So it's always going to be a hybrid, I think, for us in terms of local versus cloud-based storage. But oftentimes when I go into these shared spaces now, you go in and you go back to what was the server room. I actually think there's a real opportunity. What do you do with server rooms now? You walk into them, they're in almost every building that's been constructed in the last 20 or 30 years. And you sit there and you go, well, there's some racks, but there's nothing there anymore, right? So I think that there's a business opportunity there somewhere because I feel like that's the future that we're heading towards. Of most of those are going to be empty, but now we have them in our building. So maybe that's where Scott sits from now on. It's my office. It may be a nice, quiet spot, cool spot, right?
Until they kick you out and make it a racquetball court. Sorry,
yeah,
buddy.
something like that.
That's great. Anyone else want to weigh in on the on-prem versus cloud side? Wes?
Yeah, so right now, I don't know what the proportion is, but we're split between where we house our data and the computational capabilities. But we are seeing a migration more towards cloud and trying to figure out what the balance is and what the time frame looks like. So I mean, there's certainly a lot of appealing aspects to it. Everything from not having to maintain those server rooms, but also the personnel on site to manage that equipment. Projecting what the failure cost is, refresh rates for all of those things, and then the physical space isn't free. So one of the things that as a part of return to site, migrating people back on site, we need more site and more room for people, and every square foot's valuable. But then it also introduces the cooling challenges, fire suppression, all that type of stuff that comes with costs that we try to be conscious of. So being able to jettison that, and then also being able to take advantage of the services is something that's appealing. Now, the flip side is at least for our program, and I'm sure others have experienced this as well, a lot of the tools, or at least some of the tools that we use, weren't architected to be deployed in a cloud type environment. Some of our tools are very transaction dependent with a lot of calls back and forth, and they literally just work better being on the same backbone as the servers. And then in addition to that, if we look at our facility now, it was primarily designed to the work being intra-program inside the walls of our building. So if we look at the data pipes coming in, the redundant data pipes, it doesn't actually support hundreds and hundreds of people, simultaneously, going outside of our program to connect to a cloud for very transaction-dependent applications. So figuring out how to do the physical upgrades that are going to support better cloud, operations in the future. Looking at how we migrate applications to be better hosted in the cloud, how we move some of actually the easiest thing to move to the cloud has been our development activities. The day-to-day ops type stuff has been the more challenging, but I think, the business case is there, which is why a lot of people do it. I know, people think of the federal government as maybe not the best stewards of budget, but we actually pride ourselves on trying to be very fiscally responsible and putting as much money as we can back towards the mission work and the people, because it's jobs in West Virginia and it's contributing to the mission versus paying for hardware, data storage, power and all that type of stuff to manage our own server farm.
Right, paying for that gray matter instead of the physical stuff. As we pass it over to Brian, I also want to kind of infuse into the conversation whether or not the type of data, not just the type of system, because it sounds like system architecture often will drive where the workload should live, but does the type of data that exists, does that dictate where things should live as well? But please, Brian, go with where you were going to go.
Yeah, I'm glad you added that because so the CJIS division of the FBI, we maintain and manage some of the most sensitive law enforcement data, criminal history data. We run everything from the NCIC, National Crime Information Center, to gun background checks. And so when we started making this cloud migration journey, we had to accept that we were going to do it at the highest levels of security, and there was no opportunity to say, oh, that's too sensitive, I don't want to put that in the cloud. So we've really embraced a cloud approach, not a hybrid cloud approach. We're about 75-80% migrated now. We have on the order of between 16 and 18 petabytes of data that now reside in the cloud. What we're seeing is now the presentation of opportunities. We work with 18 to 19,000 law enforcement agencies nationwide. Every one of them in the states that they live within are making a cloud migration journey. It's creating now the demand that says, why am I backhauling traffic from everywhere in the country, in many cases everywhere in the world? Why am I backhauling traffic through WAN, dedicated WAN connections back to Clarksburg? Why do I not have distributed services that live in the cloud such that, it's entirely possible that Chicago PD is sitting on the same server that CJIS Division services that they're communicating with, and yet we backhaul that through our trusted internet connection, through CJIS WAN services back to Clarksburg, back up to the cloud, back down. So what we're seeing right now is because we've made this migration, because we've made this cloud migration, opportunities are opening up for how we reimagine the services that we offer, such that I'm not 100% a transaction based service that's running through the CJIS WAN. We're now engaging with those service providers within the cloud. That's the future. But I anticipate we'll always have something on premise. We've not yet found that thing that we've said it's too, from a CJIS division. Within the FBI, certainly, there's different considerations, but the CJIS division, right now, we're going all in for cloud, and we want to do multi-cloud.
Yeah, sure, thank you. So it's a money issue, and when you look at things from a security perspective, it's always a money issue. And we're sitting up here talking with very large agencies, the Air Force, the FBI, and NASA and such. But if you can afford it, the cloud and multiple clouds is great. A lot of folks can't, and a lot of the small businesses can't. But I really want to focus on the on-prem stuff too, because I have some thoughts there about the investment that it takes. And when you look at cybersecurity, you can look at it across 4 asset types: people, information, technology, and facilities. And when you put things in the cloud, some of those problems go away for you. But the original question was also asked about on-prem. And you cannot overstate the importance of considering your people and your facilities when you decide to do that. Whatever the security level of your information, it's different across companies, it's different across agencies. But consider that you have to focus on, to be cyber secure, which is not a thing, it's not, it's mushy. But to be cyber secure, you need to also consider some of those things like people and facilities, and not neglect that investment. On people, it's training or trust, verification, and facilities. Fort Knox has vulnerabilities, no one's just found them, right? So make sure that you're focusing on that as well. And because you invest in the cloud, if you have anything on-prem, that doesn't mean that you can divest that investment. That's the point that I would make.
Excellent. Well said. Any other go-backs on that one? Great, thank you. So that kind of takes us into a new territory here a little bit. which is a question around any projects that might have or might be leveraging artificial intelligence or machine learning, and how these technologies might have impacted your agencies. Have you guys dipped any toes into those necks of the woods? Brian?
Sure. We began using, I'm not going to use product names, but machine learning solutions a number of years ago, specifically within our the National Threat Operations Center. We receive on the order of 4,300 tips a day. Those are varying levels of whether they're threat to life, whether they're meaningful to law enforcement, or whether it's just a crank kind of a tip. We're using AI/ML to help adjudicate those tips and bring the important ones to the top of the stack. Those tips come in voice, they come in text, they come from social media. And so although we're not allowing AI/ML to disposition those from a standpoint of how to handle them, we are using it to be able to prioritize those as to when an individual is going to pick that up. The other thing we're using AI/ML for right now is advanced pattern recognition. Of course, CJIS division is huge with fingerprints. It's been a big part of what we've done. And there are people out there, to avoid detection, will actually mutilate or alter their fingerprints. They'll burn them off. They'll have them surgically altered. They'll actually have their toe tips replaced onto their finger. You've got to be committed to your craft if you're going to that extreme to be able to avoid detection. But AI/ML is able to do edge recognition, pattern detection, not necessarily to identify the individual, but to be able to say this individual has attempted to alter their biometric. And in doing so, we're able to roll that over. So AI/ML, I've said this to a number of people, in 5 years, it will be in every part of our business in some fashion. Governed, of course, we're not turning it loose. It's not rise of the machines. But governed artificial intelligence will be assisting us in a lot of those areas.
Jody?
Yeah, so CISA and the FBI work very closely together. I don't specifically work with CJIS, but we do work extensively with agents. And I can't say names or brands or companies either, but we employ AI just as they employ AI. And sometimes we're a downstream recipient of the goodness that comes from their AI solutions. And what it has done, and even it's coming very rapidly. So it's been maybe less than a year that at least I've seen it. But because of those technologies and because of that partnership, we do a lot of pre-ransomware notifications. The FBI might be following someone because they have these capabilities, and we're able to, with the FBI, sometimes go to a victim and let them know, hey, there's an actor inside your environment. We can help you eradicate that. For them, it might be something criminal, not the victim, but the actor. And that's all a result of some AI technologies. And just personally, I've had numerous successes in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, and my colleagues sitting over there in the audience as well. We're working one right now, but that's an example of, and I know AI has a negative side, and you're probably going to touch on that, but that's an example of the employment of their AI and some of the employment of our AI, and it's probably some of the same technologies, but we're able to do that for the good of, for us, critical infrastructure, and for them, possibly the prevention of further crime.
Excellent. Very cool that you guys have those synergies and are able to bring them to the audience today. That's very neat.
Big CISA fans.
Yeah, big CISA fans. I think we all are. So that's great. Scott, Wes, any AI/ML additions?
I'm actually still trying to wrap my head around Brian's characterization of commitment. So I'll maybe speak to it from a little different perspective. So on a lot of our ground systems, for similar context, use AI/ML for data processing, especially when you're looking at large data sets. But another perspective is like for onboard spacecraft, and we've seen some challenges with adoption there for good reason. So we're starting to see more use of it in non-critical applications, like drone on Mars, right? Mars rover. So initially, all the rover movement was mapped out based on imagery. It was mapped out on the ground, basically set waypoints, and the rover would navigate to that. Now it's using a lot more onboard data processing to chart and navigate its own path for data collection, looking at samples to actually do core drilling, collect those samples, create a cache, and then allow a helicopter to come pick them up, right, for ultimately for return to Earth. But one of the challenges that we've seen in mission critical applications is being able to get confidence in systems that are truly non-deterministic. And that's one of the things that we see a lot as people talk about AI or autonomy, but really what they're just talking about is kind of advanced command processing or sequencing or something like that versus true non-deterministic applications, or things like generative AI where you have a system that's actually evolving and learning. But we are starting to look at ways to embrace that. One of the challenges with like generative AI is where the servers reside and being able to put sensitive data on those, right? So we are working as an agency with Microsoft right now to figure out how we can essentially create an enclave that we can use it for whether it's development or mission data processing, or from our perspective looking at if we look at tens of thousands of software requirements every year. There's a lot of human, intelligence that goes into saying whether this is a good requirement, bad requirement, and looking at the flow down of those. If we're able to now capture that and replicate it, it will serve as a pre-processing path for our engineers to allow us to become more efficient, more effective at, harnessing, years and years of data over time to actually look at mission products to say what's good, what's bad, as an input to before human eyes hit it. So similar context to what Brian spoke about as well.
Oh, that's excellent. Scott, any additional AI/ML stuff to add?
So what I've always struggled with is I believe we're creating zettabytes worth of data every year, and I heard peta on here, right? So we're not quite at the same processing capability for the amount of data that we create on the planet every year. So I think that's a losing battle long term. This idea that we're just going to capture data and more data and more data, more sensors. But that's actually one of the challenges that we're trying to figure out right now. You want to, in the future, if you're the Air Force or if you're the Defense Department, you're looking at how do you harness some of that data, probably data labeling as the part, how do you sift through the data? It's the same story I think we're hearing over here, but it's really how do you take some of those systems and apply them in a way in which you might necessarily have to focus all your attention on huge areas, huge swaths of land and terrain, but how do you really focus in your sensors on what's likely going to be the place where you're going to see a signal? And I think you need some help there. And I just don't think that the traditional processing power pathway of larger and larger supercomputers, I think at some point, I think we've reached that limit. So that's my old hat, another job, another day. But I would say that for the Air Force, a lot of great systems. I don't want to give any names of companies, but a lot of really interesting products. It gets back down to where is the data, how's it stored, is it connected, can the machine learning, can it pick up something from that? Can we give it enough ability to look at the data, train on the data? Because if not, you can always make really bad decisions based on poorly trained data.
Well said. So that kind of wraps up the first part of the conversation. That gets us into some of the challenges around COVID-19. And I got a ton of questions in here, but we're limited on time. So really what I'd like to, I think, do is sort of push it all together. And if we could sort of go round robin here and talk about the experiences that you have seen, maybe not just at your agencies, CISA, you see a much broader scope as well. What were the impacts? How has your agency transformed? And when we talk about some of the technologies that we surfaced, AI, ML, cloud, on-prem, remote work, can I VPN in? Does my laptop charge and catch on fire? These kinds of challenges were a part of everyday life for a while. I'd love to just kind of hear a story from each of you about how it affected your agencies and some of the strategies that you employed to overcome, adapt, and get to this new paradigm. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Jody,
All right,
thanks.
so CISA is a I want to talk about the agency and then about some of the people we help, and I'll try to do it simultaneously. So CISA as an agency is 4 years old, barely 4 years old. It grew up in COVID. So the agency has only existed in a COVID and now barely post-COVID environment. And so we work remote. We don't have a big investment in buildings. And to relate that to business, when you go remote, your attack surface becomes much larger from a technology perspective because you're trusting things that might be outside of your immediate control, your IT department, your security department, whatever. You're trusting technologies, you're trusting people, you're trusting practices. You might be accessing sensitive, whether it's company or government information, potentially at home. And so we as an agency grew in that, and all of the folks like me who worked there over the last 4 years, have become adept to that. But the thing that I would say, and the most prominent thing, is that I don't have numbers, but I know that it's staggering. But the attack surface is bigger, and the number of cyber incidents has significantly increased as a result. Predominantly ransomware, and like Karen said, predominantly social engineering, phishing type. But it's because the attack surface is so much bigger. There's so much more opportunity, for those problems at an agency level, at a maybe at a small business level. But that would be my observation of COVID.
Scott?
Yeah, so trust and talent are the two. So I think the threat is usually, we developed a lot of trust right on the stage. I could actually give some stories about the precursor to CISA. I knew that really well on the DHS side. It was fun times. But obviously, it's great that we have you there because, again, part of this is the trust factor. Sitting here up on stage, and I know we just met, and again, the team that hollered for me over there, I spent part of the day yesterday with them. We went out to dinner. I had a good time. But you develop a lot of trust in person that you don't when you're looking at somebody over a video conference. And I think we're missing some of that. I think that's one of the biggest cultural challenges is that trust piece. How do you build trust virtually? When going out and having a beer at a bar or a coffee, or going to a sporting event with someone. I think that's one of the ways in which we built a lot of trust. I think that's the biggest challenge still for us post-COVID is you're looking at employees and colleagues and saying, I really need this project. Well, before you could go stand on their desk. I don't know how you virtually stand on someone's desk in the government right now. That's not a system that we've built out. But trust is certainly part of it. But I would say talent is the opportunity. And so, I'm here today in West Virginia. It's about 4.5 hours from Dayton, which is where I live at the moment. There's a way in which this audience and these groups, from a talent perspective, can plug in because of those systems that we built during COVID. And if you're a small business, talent is the hardest thing to retain in this environment. You have job opportunities in San Francisco, and they might live here in West Virginia. And I think that's one of those things that's a great leveling of the playing field. Now, in the federal government, unfortunately, we can't replace talent very quickly at all. For me, coming into my first job in the government, I think it took 6 months for me to get. That was probably rapid speed. I know for political appointees, it's sometimes it's in that same ballpark. But I think that's one of those great opportunities for us to rethink is how do we reshape talent in this environment? How we pull in talent. So if your cloud-based services allows me to tap into somebody who might be in Florida, who really just loves the lifestyle down there, doesn't want to move to Ohio in the cold winters that we have up here. But that's where I see the biggest opportunities with the culture piece is reforming trust in a different way and then maybe looking at the talent opportunity.
That's great. Thank you, Scott.
Actually, that was a great characterization. I mean, trying to figure out how to balance those is a challenge. And I think, where we're at right now is kind of like an optimization phase, looking at what worked well before the pandemic, what we found worked well during the pandemic and trying to find the right intersection point for those. There are things that, towards the end of, completely remote work that we started seeing as challenges arising from not being together for months, especially for a workforce that was used to being together 5 days a week, right? We saw, the people that had been there before actually did pretty well because they had those relationships going in. And, we can get hung up on this, did we survive the pandemic or thrive during the pandemic? And, it depends on who you ask, but I would say the majority of the new people that came into the organization, the experience was completely different for them than the people that had been there and trying to build relationships, completely virtually, and not being able to sit in team meetings, not being able to, pop your chair out of your office or your cube and roll down and ask someone a question about how to do X, Y, or Z. And, you could argue that, oh, well, I can just fire up a Teams, chat, or I can call. It's actually not the same thing, right? It's not the same as being able to have that interaction. It actually, it feels like it's an imposition sometimes to just call someone, whereas if you bumped into them in a hallway or after a meeting, you'd be able to have that conversation. But at the same time, there is a larger talent pool out there that's available to us now, and we need to figure out how to harness, that, as well as the things that come from the in-person interactions. Look for ways for people to have purposeful presence to come in and not just drag their butt into the office because you're checking a box, right? You're making, a politician happy by having, X number of butts in a seat in West Virginia. It's about, figuring out a way that it's beneficial to the employee. They see the benefit from it. They actually get some benefit out of it and don't just view it as a mandate. So I think that's a balance that we're trying to strike.
Thank you, Wes.
In October of 2019, we had started an initiative to allow some of our system administrators to log in from home in the case of like a system outage, and that was considered extreme. Just a few months later, we were taking laptops out of the basement and saying, not sure how you get it to work, but take this home and go figure it out. And in fact, AFRL came through huge with a device which allowed us to have that kind of remote access, the TENS device that allowed us to be able to take just about any laptop and create I'm going to say secure, but I realize that you'll look at me and I wasn't secure, but
No such thing.
a secure environment. Technologically, we figured it out. And I'm going to speak, CGIS division is a large organization. I'll talk about technology and the technology workers at the CGIS division. They were in a position to be able to move seamlessly forward with the tools and the technologies that we had, and it was highly successful. Looking back on it, if a team already was packaged and working together, they could go remote and do their morning stand-up, their morning scrum, and just not miss a beat. They were fine. Drop that new employee into the middle of the team, and they felt ostracized. We had tremendous attrition from those new employees kind of parachuting into a team. Furthermore, and this is anecdotal, I don't have statistics on it, but as we talked about bringing people back into the office, the number of people who expressed genuine fear, and not just fear of COVID, but social anxieties and being around people. I believe that we may create through the pandemic a mental health crisis that is going to persist for years to come, of individuals that are afraid of being in social situations, whether it's a fear of COVID or just the social interaction. And so I think it's incumbent upon organizations to consider the long-term mental health impacts of somebody. And finally, the FBI is a large organization. The FBI has made efforts to centralize much of our technology in different parts of the country. Specifically right now, there's a large technology footprint moving to Huntsville, Alabama. We exist here in North Central West Virginia, and the role that we play, about 700-800 technology workers on premise, supporting the needs of the FBI CGIS division. And the sell that we have on that is that the reason we do it better is because we are packaged with our customer. We do it better because we're here. We do it better because I know them, because it's a great relationship. That sell breaks down when I say my people aren't in the office, my people are remote, my people are distributed. And listen, as somebody leading a part of the organization that I believe contributes to the economic development and diversity of North Central West Virginia, I don't want to be the guy that sees that technology movement move or exist elsewhere. And so in addition to the culture, in addition to, I believe, better solutions, in addition to the mental health and avoiding the security obstacles of a broader attack surface, I think there's a reason, if you're going to say you're in West Virginia because of place, then it's good to commit to that place.
Well said. Well said. I think now's probably a pretty good time to start opening up to the audience, see if they have any questions for us. I don't know if we have another microphone out there as well. But if you do have a question for any of the panelists on stage today or all of the panelists, please come on up and don't be shy. I see a hand in the back there.
He's going to hide out in the back so you can't see his face if it's a wrong question.
Randy's the mic runner?
I guess so, yeah. I do everything here.
The work of 4 grown men.
I'm just trying to make sure he gets his steps in, that's all. Mike Deishberg, Route Risk with Scott Rutchick and his group Vertex. Question is, what about our grid? I read all these things about our grid being stretched, failing in places. Cryptocurrencies cause lots of demand on it. All this information going in the cloud, aren't you grid dependent then? And what are we doing to secure our national grid system, especially for agencies like the FBI and the military and things of that nature? The more we put up there, the more I become more concerned about power and our distribution of power.
Gosh, did you guys get that? We got a lot of echo.
I couldn't.
Was the
There
question
I
about
think
too much
that-
protecting
feedback.
the American grid?
Yeah, I think the
concerned
gist
about the
of
grid.
it was
It
grid
seems like
protection, especially given the increased dependency on, it sounds like, especially with data centers using huge resources. I mean, electricity, water, cooling, everything else.
From an FBI perspective, we work very closely with a group of companies known as InfraGuard, Infrastructure Guard, you get that? And we try to bring to bear to that good cyber hygiene, good information sharing practices, also to be able to allow them to share tips and threats against their infrastructure so that we can investigate, and for us to be able to share tips, threats, trends to encourage them to harden certain parts of the national infrastructure. So we work closely with industry partners, with utilities. With regard to data centers specifically, to me, that's one of the resiliency aspects that you only get if you plan, and that is the notion of moving to a place where you're multi-region, multi-cloud, and you avoid the idea that all of your assets, all of your equities live, even though they're not on your premise, live in another single place. So, yeah.
So CISA is charged with, I heard grid and I heard infrastructure, and I'm sorry I didn't understand all the question, but CISA is the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. Up until recently, we probably had more advisors on the physical side than we did the cyber side. And the reason is just, it goes back to talent, finding it, onboarding it, all those different nuanced challenges with federal government. But so I think in 2016, infrastructure was broken down into 16 buckets, 16 sectors. And for each one, we have an SRMA, and I think that stands for Sector Risk Management Agency. And CISA is responsible for a lot of those 16, but other agencies are responsible for others. And one of the things we do, we're small, less than 3,000 feds right now, I think, but is to share information across those other risk owners and those other interested parties, to share that information, and then to the maximum extent of our ability is to provide vulnerability assessments, whether they're of a strategic, of a technical nature, across cyber, physical, the communications network, and chemical. But I think the nexus and the most important thing to the security of our infrastructure, our infrastructure is vulnerable. Our grid, by definition, whatever, whether it's electrical, whatever, it is vulnerable. That's a fact, and it is aging. but it's the sharing of information that when something is identified, to raise your hand and say, hey, there's a problem here, and then seek whatever assistance that's going to be, whether it's from the public or private sector.
Well said. Other questions? And if you do have one, I'd ask that you step a little closer to the stage. We're getting some feedback that way. Yeah, we can't hear it.
We heard it twice.
Yeah. It's great. Any other questions for the panelists?
This is one of our other panelists, Roger Hanshaw, who's Speaker of the House or the West Virginia Legislature.
I hope he's coming up to wish West Virginia a happy birthday.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not actually, but we can do that. So I'm a lawyer. My question is, can any of you cite examples of instances in which perhaps the laws become antiquated, or that you've seen the law be the barrier to advancement of technological advancement within your agencies?
Did you get that one clearly?
Yeah, not that I can think of, actually. The question was, any instances of where law has actually been an impediment to us. No, I'm failing to recall any specific instances.
I have an instance of not a law, but a presidential directive, if I may, which I'm no lawyer, so I'm not sure whether that qualifies as a law or not. But PPD 41 defines incident response to a cyber incident, and it puts the onus in 3 buckets: DOJ, DHS, and DNI. And CISA is now the DHS action arm, and DOJ is largely the FBI. And then DNI is the intelligence apparatus, which the victim will rarely ever interface with, but they might interface with someone from these 2 agencies. I come from the National Guard also, so I have a DoD background. I've 26 years in the Air Guard, 18 of those were full-time. And in every state, there is, whether it's large, in some states it's large, but it is in every state, a cyber response capability within the National Guard. The problem is that the interpretation of PPD 41 prohibits the National Guard from helping local governments in the incidents in federal status. They have to be in state status. So that's, from a cybersecurity perspective, that is an example of, it's not a law, it is a presidential directive, and in the further interpretation of that presidential directive that prohibits a capability that is willing from participating outside of being activated by the governor, which sometimes doesn't happen. So
I would love to jump in this one only from my recent experience. I think it's less the laws and more back to the intent and the interpretation. So especially if you have a law that was written 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, and you're trying to apply it now to a particular situation, if there isn't specific guidance for a government lawyer or an acquisition professional or something along those lines about how to pursue a particular situation, they will always default to the FAR. And so in DoD speak, that's one of our big many step process that you have to go through. There's a big chart that I could grab show all of you about the DoD, the FAR. But in that, I think that's one of the biggest challenges for us. If we don't have a comfort point with the new technology, if we don't have a comfort point with an acquisition type, I'm sure all of you here are familiar with SBIR, SITR. That's certainly something that falls into the Air Force in terms of an area where we focus time. My work is on things like CRADAs, partnership intermediary agreements, a lot of the non-FAR tools. And oftentimes it comes down to less the law and more the interpretation. Even if the law was established 20 or 30 years ago, the people who wrote those are no longer usually in government at that point. And I think that's really the hardest part, is how do you get back to the original intent when that law, that statute was put in place? How do you follow it now? And so I think that it's less that the law is an impediment, but our interpretations don't always evolve as fast. I think that does sometimes come into, and maybe the directive is narrow and not bringing in the military enough into some of the response components. But I think that's one of those where we have to find a way to evolve. I think the statute's there, the law's there. It's just that sometimes is is a hindrance is our ability to learn and adapt to evolving circumstances.
I'm sure that applies across many verticals, my friend. But
Yes.
this has been wonderful. That is our time for today. If you would mind, please give another round of applause for our panelists today. We are so grateful that you came out to join us. We'll get you unmiked. That leads us up to a break here. We've got a few minutes to be able to, get some refreshments. We've got our beverage station over here on the right side of the house. I would ask that our panelists that come up a little bit later, let's get introduced up here. Trilogy has a table with a cloth on it. Come up and meet us a few minutes ahead of time before the next session so that we can kind of run things nice and smooth, get you mic'd up, and get everything ready to go. Thanks, everyone. We appreciate you.
IBM. IBM is call a mature technology company. We just turned 112 a couple of days ago. We have everything from software, hardware, services. In my service catalog alone, I have over 1,000 different products. But along with that, we also have a very strong commitment to diversity, inclusion, and equity. That's something that's been part of our culture for many, many years. And I have the distinct honor to introduce our panelists today. We have Mr. Roger Henshaw from West Virginia. He's the Speaker of the House, West Virginia. We have Ms. Sarah Biller, Michael Green, thank you, sir, and Mr. James Estep. Thank you very much. And we also have our moderator, Frank Vitale. Where's Frank? Did we lose Frank? All right. Thank you very much. Frank.
Well, good morning. Good morning, everyone. What a great conference, huh? What a great conference. Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate the leadership and all the hard work that goes into putting this conference on. We've really seen a great effort on the part of Brandon and Randy at Trilogy, and we just appreciate their leadership and thank you for bringing us all together. Great things are happening today. I want to say happy birthday, West Virginia. Yeah. 160 years of great dedication to our nation, and we mine the coal and build the steel, and we do great things. We're in space. We're everywhere. So you should be very, very proud to be from West Virginia, be a West Virginian, maybe born, maybe by choice, and if nothing else, being a guest of West Virginia today. We have an outstanding panel, a group of rock stars here, and I couldn't be more excited to be with them today. They're force multipliers in their own right. They're making a difference every day, not only in West Virginia, but in this country. Each one of them makes a tremendous impact across the globe, and they well represent our state. So I couldn't be more excited to have them here today. So I'm going to ask them the first question. Just please introduce yourselves a little bit so that we understand your vantage point, where you're coming from, and tell us what excites you today about the West Virginia economy. Sarah, we'll start with you.
Great. Frank, thank you. And good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Biller. I'm the Executive Director of Vantage Ventures. We're an initiative at the John Chambers College of Business and Economics at WVU. And when we started this initiative, Frank, it was the idea that John Chambers posited that we could really transition West Virginia to a startup state. And by that, he meant really surround individuals building technology companies, those that are capital efficient, that have large global, oftentimes addressable markets, that are also investable, that those individuals and those ideas were resident here in the state. And then since we've opened our doors in 2019, I'm pleased to say it exists. It doesn't just exist in small pockets, it is distributed across the state. We get to work with those relentless problem solvers every day. We get to drive private capital to them, and we get to see them succeed in areas that are of pressing importance for not just our state, but for our region and the country. Areas like digital health, new forms of infrastructure, data and IoT, and then why we're here a lot today around cybersecurity. And we're just thrilled to see that momentum happening. And we're kind of at the tip of the spear in this momentum. And so thank you for having us today.
Mike?
So it's always difficult to follow Sarah Biller, but I'm Mike Graney. I'm the Executive Director of the West Virginia Department of Economic Development. Been on the job about 4.5 years. But economic development works like dog years, so I really have about 40 years of experience. I still consider myself a recovering entrepreneur after 30 years of business here, but this has been a fascinating role for me. I've learned a lot about a lot, and we really intentionally developed a strategy to intentionally diversify our economy. And what excites me is that it's working, and we've attracted new forms of business. We're standing up businesses that used to be here but weren't and are repopulating. I'm excited about the attraction piece, but I'm probably more excited about what's happening with the number of our existing, industries here. They're growing, they're expanding, they're adding jobs, ensuring that those investments will be here for decades to come. So that's very, very exciting to me, and I love working with this group of people and all the folks that I have the opportunity to work with. The Development Office, or Department of Economic Development, is small, but it's mighty, and it has incredible depth and a group of people who are incredibly passionate about our state. And so that's why I'm doing it too, because I'm passionate about our state. Jim?
Thanks, Mike. Jim?
I'm Jim Estep, President and CEO of the High Technology Foundation. Probably most of you in this room. The High Technology Foundation is about trying to build a basis for a knowledge sector in West Virginia. And when I look around the room and think about the progress of the effort over the last 20 years, I get real excited about that. I'm also really excited about the work that these two guys have been doing here over the last few years. There's been a feeling of hope, a feeling of a new day, and I'm very appreciative of that as a West Virginian, but I also am very appreciative of their commitment to wanting to help us grow this knowledge sector, especially Mike here. For many years, I think we were basically ignored as a segment of the economy. And I can tell you from my perspective, that's been changing. And I'm very appreciative of that. And it makes me very excited about where we're going to go and, where we'll be in the next few years. So I'm very appreciative to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Speaker Hanshaw?
Thanks, Frank. I'm Roger Hanshaw. I'm the token politician on the panel this morning. I have the privilege now of serving as the Speaker of the West Virginia House of Delegates. And what excites me, Frank, about the economy is not just the fact that it is transitioning, but how quickly that has happened. So when I ran for the legislature in 2014, I did so with a single priority, and that was to transition West Virginia's economy into a 21st century economy. Well, many of us are engaged in an ongoing effort right now to travel the country to talk about what we have going on here in West Virginia. And the line that we've taken to using when we do that is that West Virginia mined the coal that made the steel, that built the bridge, that carried the trucks, that moved the men, that won the war. And we've said that so many times it's almost become trite now, but it underscores our role as an energy state and the history that energy production has had in West Virginia since before we were a state. And while we're still proud of being an energy resource state today, it's no longer just an extractive energy state. It's now an energy state that exports and produces energy resources of every kind and is actively recruiting and growing manufacturing and research and development entities here that use energy and that develop energy resources and that are doing so faster than I think most of us could have ever predicted just a few short years ago.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker. The subject of this panel is economic diversity, and I can't help but to think that given the fact that you lead the House of Delegates, which has representatives from all 55 counties of West Virginia, that you, and I know, through your leadership, diversity of the economy is important, diversity in multiple ways, diversity and inclusion, as well as economic diversity, job, workforce development, and diversity. So from an economic diversity standpoint, what is the legislature doing these days to actually address that?
The absolute number one thing that we do, and the number one thing that I want to continue to do, is to support Mike and the team that we have at the Development Office and the Department of Economic Development, because they're our face. They are the public face of West Virginia, and we're extraordinarily proud of the work that Mike and the team there in our Office of Economic Development are doing. If you're a company that's new to West Virginia here today and you haven't met Mike, I hope you'll do so on our next break, because we are in a position now as the legislature to, for the first time in my lifetime, be able to adequately resource up our Department of Economic Development to meaningfully and effectively compete with other jurisdictions around the country for enticement and recruitment of investment in technology-based businesses here in West Virginia. We want to continue to do that. Frank, we're in an environment now in which we have budget surpluses, again, for the first time in many of our lifetimes. We have meaningful budget surpluses now. We have deployed billions of dollars now of that surplus into economic enhancement, economic recruitment in the form of support for our Department of Economic Development. We really think it's not our job as the elected leaders to decide what we should target. We think that market forces ought to drive that in a way that they perhaps didn't, thinking back over the past 50 years. But we think they should, and we certainly think they should now, and I know Mike and his team do that. I view our role in economic diversification as adequately resourcing our Department of Economic Development to go be our forward-facing front to the world.
Thank you. Before I ask the next question, I want to tee it up by saying that manufacturing.net cited Appalachia as a good place to invest, in part because of the workforce is well trained by vocational schools and specialized education programs. And West Virginia boasts the lowest manufacturing turnover rate in the United States. So with that said, and Jim, I'm going to ask you to kick this off, then we'll move around the panel. West Virginia has seen a rise in manufacturing, especially in the technology sector. What are some of the key initiatives that we, and that's government, public, private, is taking to attract more businesses to this state, and how are we incentivizing those companies to invest in West Virginia?
I think from the government perspective, or from the technology perspective, the federal operations that you heard from earlier have had an incredible impact in terms of creating a business case for companies to want to be here. The FBI, NOAA, the Energy Lab, the contracting that they do attracts these companies to want to do business in West Virginia. And of course, one of the issues that we have struggled with, perennially for a very long time has been, the educational attainment levels of our workforce. And that's been a big issue for us. But I've seen from the universities, the K-12 system, Workforce West Virginia, the legislature, a lot of initiatives put in place to not only train the existing workforce, but also to recruit in workforce, especially those expatriates who left the state because there wasn't a job. And that buoys my confidence that we're going to be able to truly capitalize on that opportunity.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, so a lot to be said here, Brent. And grateful to Roger and his leadership for actually providing resources to the Department of Economic Development for us to accomplish our mission. And, frankly, we're at a really unique time. And, for 30 years in business, I always wanted to be good. But I think I've come into this role at a time, I wanted to be lucky as well sometimes, and this is a lucky time to be in this role because we have a fantastic business environment, which took us 15 to 20 years to create. We have, trained and skilled workforce who has muscle memory. Not all of them have certificates or graduate or college degrees or whatever, but they can fix anything under any circumstance, and that's being recognized. We focus on manufacturing because of the supply chain, the inputs and then the off-takers, right? Now, in the tech space, it's doing the same thing. It just happens that we're not maybe, building steel or, sheet steel or, chemical manufacturing. We're creating knowledge. And so it's just really, really, really important as we look to intentionally diversify our economy, right? So, we have some subject matter experts working in the office who can then really talk to new folks about coming to West Virginia, locating here, and why they should be here. Yes, West Virginia. And to be frank, we probably need a couple of additional incentives to address the knowledge industry from a statutory tax credit. We really only have one, and that's the high wage growth, statutory tax credit, high wage job growth tax credit. So we could add to that, I think, to be more attractive. So something for us to talk about.
Yep.
So Sarah, you not only work with obviously with our government, with federal and state government, the private sector, but you are at the tip of the spear with working with higher education, the university. So from your perspective, how do you see investment and why companies should come here in the areas of manufacturing and technology?
Yeah, Frank, it's such a good question. And I think each of the gentlemen on the panel touched on something we shouldn't underestimate. and that is that the historical legacy of the West Virginia culture is one of persistence, it's of drive, it's of critical thinking. We didn't survive in these hills by being dummies, right? We understood how to actually create value out of a very adverse and complex operating environment. That culture of persistence and intelligence carries through in today's needs in our technology sector. So one thing that we often share with our emerging technology companies that are here, but also those that are coming, is the untapped talent pool that exists. The university system is creating it, but we also have strong micro-credentialing capabilities, like organizations like Newforce, where non-traditional non-traditional employees can go through a series of learning how to code and how to actually be a well-functioning member of a technology company. And that's because they've learned those skills innately. Brad Smith was recently quoting and saying that, Appalachia also has its own set of geniuses. We just have to discover them. So I don't want us to ever not think that our culture isn't one that can compete. We do so effectively, and I think we're evolving the way that we're looking at education to understand those needs. And it's a great draw to the technology companies that we work with. Mike and I collaborate often with large, globally significant multinational companies who, when they come to West Virginia, they see a talent pool that's ready to compete.
Speaker Hanshaw, you mentioned earlier about traveling to, abroad. You're a representative and ambassador for the state of West Virginia. From your perspective, what are we doing to encourage and incentivize outside investment in the state of West Virginia with regards to manufacturing and technology?
It's a combination of things, Frank, one of which that we're extraordinarily proud of is a direct outgrowth of what was just said in terms of workforce development. And I would really be remiss not to talk about the way West Virginia differentiates itself from most other jurisdictions. In fact, we believe all other jurisdictions in the United States from a workforce training perspective in what we in the government like to call our Senate Bill 1 approach. For those employers in the room who are considering an investment or an expansion somewhere in the United States, West Virginia has created a program working in collaboration with our institutions of higher education and our State Higher Education Policy Commission to provide 100% zero-cost training to workers who you will hire who need a skill set. If your companies will work with our Higher Education Policy Commission to identify a skill set that your workers need to fill jobs in your companies, the state of West Virginia, working with our educational institutions and our Higher Education Policy Commission, will provide that training at no cost to either you or the student in what we call our Senate Bill 1 last dollar in approach. We believe we are the only jurisdiction in America with a program for workforce training and workforce development that is that aggressive. Frank, we're really proud of that because our HEPC will not only deliver training to workers in precast programs, but they will actually work with you. They will work with employers. They will work with startup companies. They will work with established entities to create and craft a program and deploy that program to your specifications for your workers at no cost to you. And we're very proud of that.
Yeah, and I would just add that West Virginia is making a significant investment in the community and technical college system, as well as the career and tech education programs in K-12. And I think we're starting to see employers begin to rally around that, particularly in aerospace. And we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Hey, Frank, let me add
Yeah.
just quickly. So the West Virginia Invest program is phenomenal. And we also have a Learn and Earn program in the CTCs. Not everyone is cut out to go to a four-year course of study. And, an education is a lifelong journey, right? So here's the story. You're 20 years old. You've just gotten your certification in cybersecurity or in, line operations in the chemical plant. And you have zero college debt and you're making $80,000 a year. That's not a bad story, right? If you choose at a later date to go back and get additional training, well, good on you, right? The Learn and Earn program is fantastic for employers in the state because it pays 50% of the wage of that employee while they're pursuing a certificate in the CTCs. When we tell that story to people who are interested in coming to West Virginia, they're blown away. Cannot believe it. So to Roger's point, we're one of the only states that has both of those programs. I think we are the only state that has both of those programs. I just wanted to add that.
If you're looking to expand and you have workforce training needs, that you will find nowhere that will welcome you more warmly than Mike and his team will welcome you here.
Thank you. So when we think about our audience here, the technology sector relies heavily on data analytics. And so my question is, how is West Virginia supporting the development of the data analytics industry and the creation of jobs for data analytics skills? So who would like to jump up and help me with that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of kick us off, but I think each of us have a different role in this very important moment in time. We heard this morning that data is a currency that not only is important in our security of our country, but in all other industries. And so in our case, with our data and IoT and sensors, one of the things that we see is significant depth in the state already with computational capabilities and supercomputers like Jim has attracted to the state, all the way through to the ability of our workforce to handle data sets, to be the individuals who wrangle it, who organize it, who normalize it. And these are critically important components when we go to attract the next category of data-intensive technology companies or industry partners. Again, we're drawing on our deep well of critical thinking and talent that's prepared for these complex problems, as well as actually the infrastructure that exists here. People don't go first to West Virginia when they think about a place to do strong computer visioning. You know, we heard this morning the words petabyte and zettabyte. I challenge anyone to define what that means. But it's happening here within the state of West Virginia. And so it's an extraordinary time for us to really continue our leadership and share that story more broadly, that we have tremendous depth and industry going on in the state. But others, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, just to add to that, we think about it, AI, ML, data analytics cuts across every single industry sector. And, it's just a fact of life now. And so you've got to get good at it, and you've got to develop your own resources, and then you have to contract for other resources that could come to you all as a business partner. So, we think this is critical to the future of diversifying the economy.
I might add too, Mike, just if I could, just before anyone else answers, we had a company come to us that was headquartered in Boston that really was looking for the next generation of data scientists. They'd been priced out of the Boston market, the San Francisco market, the New York market, and found again that critical aptitude here in the state of West Virginia to begin to hire for the next generation of data scientists that are doing enterprise AI across the world. That's a unique opportunity for us to continue to think about ourselves differently and meet the new demands, as Mike said, for each industry that has its own data and IoT requirements.
And what makes a difference there, Sarah, thanks for bringing that up, when other companies identify that company, which is, pre-revenue unicorn, right? Unbelievable. They say, well, wait a second. If it's good enough, if West Virginia is good enough for that company, I want to be there too, or at least want to take a look. So that helps validate attracting other companies in that space.
Those are the supply side answers, Frank. We also, as state government, have a little bit of an obligation to be supportive on the demand side too. So we have made a conscious effort as leaders of state government to try and be your customer to the extent we can, and find places to utilize technology solutions to government problems. So how do we deploy data analytical solutions to healthcare? For example, our Department of Health and Human Resources is the largest entity of state government. We spend more money and deploy more state resources through the Department of Health and Human Resources in West Virginia than any other facet of the government. And as a consequence of that, we have an obligation to try and do it well. And for us, that means deploying technology resources to analyze the data that we have and make sure we're deploying the resources well. That's but one example of several that we're trying to deploy now to be your customer.
Jim? Yeah, I would just say, there's not a business out there that isn't slowly but surely becoming data-centric. Every company there is learning ways of taking data associated with what they do and analyzing it in a way to be more competitive, more efficient, whatever the case may be. So the data analyst, the data scientist, whatever that, and that's an evolving title, that's an evolving career field. But this is going to become one of the most prolific occupations in our country eventually. And so